Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Let's start for today. We'll start with if there are any questions or observations from yesterday, and we'll take that first. Otherwise, we'll proceed with the session today. And today we have Sridhar with us. So, Sridhar, can you introduce yourself briefly? What you are doing and what's your educational background? Sridhar, can you hear me?
Hello? Hello? Yeah, I'm Sridhar. I have completed my BTech Biotech at Vignan University. Hello?
Just 1 minute. I can't hear you. I think yeah, Sridhar, can you speak now? I was actually
Yeah,
I, okay.
yeah, sir. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Sridhar. I have completed my BTech Biotech at Vignan University, and I am fresher. My hobbies are playing cricket and watching outdoor games and indoor games. This is my first class.
You have some exposure to programming earlier. You have done on any other language or Python?
No, no, no. I don't have any programming language experience. I'm a fresher.
Okay.
Mm,
So that should not be a problem. But we had a few classes earlier. Maybe later on I'll speak to you that how to catch up. But we'll proceed with the session today. Thanks
okay.
for your introduction, Sridhar.
Yeah.
So any observation or question from anyone else from the previous sessions? Okay. Otherwise, today, now what we have done until now is getting to know Python as a language through which we speak to our computers, our machines. And the idea was that Python is a language which is the most widely used today in data science, machine learning, web scraping, and a lot of integration which is being done across the applications which run on different parts of internet. Python is the most preferred language, and since these are the areas where most of the new development is happening, gradually, as we saw through a video some time back, that gradually starting somewhere around 2010-11, Python had started gaining much more interest from the development community, and now it's the most widely used language in the world. So until now, what we were trying to do is to understand how Python works. Not everything, but those parts of Python which we are going to mostly use in data science. And starting today, we will start using the some of the key activities, or we will start focusing on some of the key activities which as a data scientist you would be doing, or as a anybody who is working in a data science division, they will have to spend a lot of time on data preparation. So the main role of data science, as we discussed earlier, was to get data, analyze data, and to get insight and different patterns which are emerging from the data. Because today the businesses just can't be competitive if they're not able to derive the insights which is available in the vast amount of data that we are surrounded with nowadays. So anyone who does a better job in finding out what are the trends in the sale, what are the how the preferences of the customers are changing, or for that matter, even in manufacturing, uh, the different data that we have on production, on safety, on the production line, on the vendor data. If you're able to analyze that better and find the different patterns, then either we can increase the efficiency in our production, or we can increase our efficiency in customer conversion, or increase the sales to the customer. So these are the things which data scientists would be doing. But the first thing is to get data and analyze the data. So the and that itself, as you would see, is takes anywhere between half of the time of a data scientist, or half of the time of the people in the data science division would be going into collection of data, cleaning of data, preparation of data for further processing. That is what we are starting today. So you would come across different words like, say, data mining, data munging, data wrangling, and some of these things are not really very well defined, that okay, this is the term which would be used always in a given context, and therefore you will see that several people would be using that in certain or slightly different ways. But it's good to uh, do a recap on what these words stand for. So the first word that you will come across is data mining. So data mining, as the word mining says, that there is something which is hidden under the earth, and then you extract that. That's called mining. So data mining also is used in the same context, that there is a lot of data which is hidden inside the organization or available outside the organization. So after mining, what do? We do the mining, and then we do the refining of those, say, iron ore or bauxite to make aluminium. So we do the mining, and then whatever we extract from mining, that is used for refining. Same thing we do in data mining also. So there is a lot of data hidden inside the organization, and this data can be structured data, the unstructured data. But data mining itself concerns more with the structured data. So data that you have in your Excel sheets, in the different types of database management systems, like your Oracle or maybe MongoDB or many other kinds of databases or the relational databases nowadays. So extracting the information from the structured database and doing the analysis of that, that is data mining. So data mining is concerned more with the analysis of the existing data. It means that it is doing the analysis of data which already exists, what has already happened in the past. The key difference between just doing data mining and data science would be that data science also concerns itself with predictions. So while data mining will be giving you all kinds of analysis of what has happened in the past by extracting data which is available in different types of databases that we have, the role of data scientist goes beyond that. That is not just analysis of the past, but based on the past data, we find patterns, and then based on those patterns, we make the projections for the future, we make the predictions for the future, which can be used by the different divisions inside the organization for making the sales forecast, for preparing for the production efficiency improvement, and things like that. So that was data mining. Now, once we extract data, then you will come across the word called data munging. So what happens is that the data at your end or in any of the organization will not be available in a single source. So for example, we will have the employees data in the HR system. We will have the uh, production data in the production system. We will have the sales data in the sales system. And the reality of the world today is that at very few places, even today, even in the large organizations, and I have seen that myself, and most of the Indian companies, we are roughly about 10 million people working on those things, are working on these kind of activities, because the systems inside the large banks, the system inside the large corporations are not really that well organized. So because of the historical reason, everybody started with their own systems. The sales department bought one application for their own use, or the production department got some application developed for their own use, and all of them will have their own segregated databases. So one of the key things would be to extract data from the multiple systems, and it will not be limited to the databases inside the organization, but you will also access a lot of information from outside the organization, from your vendors, from the different information suppliers. In the case of finance, you will collect a lot of data from the stock exchanges, from the central government, which publishes data about the income, expenses, national income, and things like that. So a lot of information is available inside the organization, a lot of information we access from outside the organization. Collating all this data. So for example, in the inside the organization itself, you will have some data in the HR system, some data in the performance evaluation system, some data in the attendance system, and we will have to collate all this data. That process broadly is called data munging. Then after we have, as we collate data, then you will see that some data is missing here, some data is missing there, or the data is actually available in different formats. So for example, the employee ID could be a numeric field in one system, the same employee ID could be a string field in another system. So, and so if you want to combine the data, there are certain transformations that we will have to do. So all this data collection, merging of data, the transformation of the basic data, that is called the data munging part. So after data munging, we will have the set of data available which we can take up for processing. Now, depending upon what is the objective for which we want to process the data, a lot of transformation we will have to do in the data, and some of these things we will start seeing as we go along. So doing a lot of doing the operations on the data so that we can prepare the data and bring it in a format in which our analytics algorithm will understand it better, will understand it faster. That process is broadly called as data wrangling. These are the three words you will come across. All these three things come under the domain of the data science, and therefore we'll be spending some time on doing these things. But as a data scientist, even before we start on a project, before we even start getting the data, we have to understand a few things along with the customer, along with the project manager, along with the domain experts which will work in the data science team, or who will be specialist in the given domain. As a data scientist, we just don't jump onto the data and start doing different types of operation. Even before that, we need to understand what is the purpose for which we are doing the data analysis or prediction. That is, what is that we are going to predict? What is that we are going to project along with the data? What kind of pattern analysis we are going to do, and why? These things are very important for anyone in the data science uh, section of the organization to really understand. So just remember that as a data scientist, it's not sufficient to just get data and start working on that. Before that, we need to ask some questions, and these questions would be understanding that who is actually going to use the work that you are going to do. Is it going to be used by the end customer? So for example, if you're making a recommendation system based on the past analysis of data, that would be directly used by the customer. There would be certain things which will be used by different people in the organization. So for example, if you're making a sales forecast, that sales forecast is not going to be used by the customer, but it will be used by your sales department. If we are analyzing the patterns in production for bringing more efficiency in the production pipeline, that data would be used by people in the production department, in the factories, in the manufacturing setup. So it's very important to understand that who is the end user. And let's take some examples as to why is that important. Because if you are making a recommendation system which will be used by the customer, then the response time for that has to be very, very different. It has to be very fast, and it needs to be available on the devices which the customers are using. So if I am going to a shopping site and using that on my phone, then the response better be available in a fraction of the second. Otherwise, I will lose interest. And if I have already moved to another screen and then your recommendation is popping up, then actually it's of little use. Therefore, it's important to understand, because as a data scientist, when you make the prediction, you have to say that whether that prediction would be just made on based on the computation that you do on your own servers, or will that be processed on the end devices, which is called the edge computing? It means that you are doing a lot of computation at the edge of the system or in the handheld devices or uh, even the laptop or the desktop, but not on the servers on your backend. Then also it will impact that what kind of algorithm you will develop. So for example, a few things will be done instantly, like recommendations. So when we go to Netflix, recommendation has to come in the moment I log into the Netflix. But if I am making a sales prediction, then that prediction need not be done every day. Those predictions I make only once in a quarter. So the computation requirement or the kind of algorithms that we'll choose or kind of time that we can spend on these activities would be very, very different. At the same time, how do you present? Because earlier we saw that as a data scientist, not just doing the data munging and wrangling, not just doing the analytics, not just identifying the patterns in the data, not just making the prediction, but making the presentation of your findings or the communication of it is very, very important. So how do you communicate to your end customer? How do you communicate to your board of directors? How do you communicate to your sales head? How do you communicate to your production head? The communication process has to be very, very different, and the tools and techniques that we use for communication would be very different. And therefore, it's very important to understand who the end user of your work is going to be. So that's one thing, that if a project is given to you, then we need to ask questions, that who is the end user, what are the sources I'm going to get the data from, and we need to profile the users. In our mind, we need to create the profile of the user, create the personas, and see that how are we going to design our algorithms, how are we going to design our testing process. So for example, if it is a customer application in which our output would be used, then we need to test that with the kind of customers which are going to use the application. Some A few things would be focused on the younger age group, a few things would be focused on women, a few applications would be focused on, say, older age group, and their behavior pattern, their knowledge of or their ease of using uh, different IT devices is at different levels. So you also need to see that how you are going to design your testing process. So all of these things become very important, and you also get to ask a lot of questions about in which domain it is being to use. It is going to be used. So, for example, if it is in whether you are analyzing data for the use in medical science, or you are going to use that for e-commerce, some of these things are very important to understand, and that's where our life starts in data science, by asking these questions from our customer, from the project manager, from the domain experts, and then we get to understand the needs of the customer, we get to understand the persona of the customer, and more important, we need to understand the objectives with which we are starting our data science project. So having done that, now you will get the data, and then we need to start understanding this data from quantitative perspective as well as the qualitative perspective. So first we will understand that what are the quantitative analysis that we need to do. Now, after having got the data, as I was describing earlier, that you will get data from multiple sources, you need to understand. So why are we spending so much time on the data preparation phase? The main purpose of that we need to prepare data which our processing algorithms, whatever we use for uh, analysis, using the statistics or using different machine learning techniques, we need to ensure that this data is suitable or is brought into the format in which these algorithms understand these better. So for example, right now we are doing the processing with using the pandas or different other libraries of Python, and then as we go along, we'll start feeding this data into our machine learning algorithms, and scikit-learn is one of the most popular machine learning libraries. But scikit-learn will accept only the numeric inputs, whereas the data you are going to receive could be partly numeric, partly string. So we have to convert all the string information, or all the non-numeric information that we receive. We will have to convert that into numeric information. Only then the machine learning algorithms will be able to process that. So some of these things we must keep in mind. Uh, we will see today that in the pandas data frame, we can still have null values and it will not raise a problem. But the same thing I can't really feed into the scikit libraries or other machine learning libraries, because it will not accept any null values. So that kind of processing we have to do. Also, not just what it will be accepting, but we also need to see that how it will work faster. So if the data is supplied in a given manner, the algorithms will work faster. And therefore, as a data scientist, we also need to ensure that our system is faster in making those predictions, because we're not talking about just processing a few hundred data elements. Gradually, as we will see, that you will have maybe millions of records to process, and each record may be having, thousands or 10,000s of features. Or in the table, you may be having millions of records and multiples of thousands or multiples of 10,000s of rows. So when we are processing that kind of data, then even if you are achieving, say, a small efficiency in the processing, then it saves you a lot of time. And therefore, the main purpose of the data preparation phase is to prepare the inputs in a format in which it can be processed, and in the format in which it will be processed faster by the algorithms that we are going to use. That's the main purpose. Now, we will go through the different steps that is involved in the data preparation part. So first part is the data munging or data cleansing, as we briefly discussed, and we'll go through the different types of steps that we have to perform, or different types of activities that we have to perform. But even before we start doing that, first is to get a feel of the data, that you are on a project, and now you know that what is the objective, who are the users, what are the sources that I'm going to get the data from, and now you have the access to the data. Now, having got the access to the data, now the first thing that we need to know is that what this data is all about, what does it contain? And that's where now we will switch to our data set, and this is where we ended the class yesterday. So I'm using certain, I'm importing certain libraries. Now we go to reading the files. So suppose I have got a data of the housing sales in a given area, and it contains a lot of information about different types of houses in different localities, and it contains some data about the houses and the prices at which they were sold. And the objective is to make prediction of the price of a house. So my customers, assume, are the buyers and the sellers of the houses, and they come to you and say that, okay, now I want to sell this house. Can you advise me what could be the right price which I can get? So as a buyer or as a seller, you are interested in getting the right price for the house that you want to sell, or the flat that you want to sell or buy. And that's the project has been given to you. So we first see this file. So I will be reading this data. Now you can see that the pandas itself gives you a lot of different features, or in Python we have the features to read different types of data. This data has been given to me in the CSV format. So it's very easy to operate on that. I just give the location where this data is available, and that location could be maybe it is residing on the customer's servers or somewhere else. So here you will just give the location and then pd.read underscore CSV, and then you give the location or the URL of the file here. So as you will see that we can read from the internet, we can read from our local systems, or we can read from the Google Drive that we have. So here in this case, I am reading this file from the internet. So I'm just giving a URL. So the command would be that I am calling PD is the library of pandas that we have initialized earlier. We say import pandas as PD. So now this PD is, I am referring to the pandas library, and we are saying that from the pandas library, get the function read CSV and perform that function read CSV with the given URL. So it will read that file and then it will store it to a variable called housing. Okay, so now I have read that. Having read that, let's see what is contained, and we will go into broader details later on. So we just say housing.head. It will show me by default, when we say head, it will show me the first 5 records. So we are able to see that, okay, now this housing data which I have received, it has data on the location of the house. So it has the longitude, the latitude. It has the housing mean age. It means that how old the houses are, how many rooms are there, how many bedrooms are there, what is the population living in those houses, how many people live in those houses. Now, how many households are there? So by seeing this data itself, you can figure out a few things. That I have data about the location. I have the data about the size of the house, that is how many rooms, how many bedrooms. I have data about the people living in those houses, how many people are living. What is the income of the people who are living there? Where is the house located? So whether it is near the bay or near the ocean and things like that. And what is the price at which, what is the price of those houses? So median house value. So now by seeing this data itself, you can figure out that it is not the data about the individual houses. So for example, one individual house will never have an 880 rooms. It will never have 129 bedrooms. So just by seeing this data, some questions would come to our mind that what is this data? I mean, obviously this is not about, one row is not representing data about one house. Then we can either go through the documentation which may be available along with this, or we can ask the question going back to the customer. Let's see, I am seeing that in each record, you are having total bedrooms running into hundreds or thousands. So obviously it is not a data about an individual house. So what is this data about? Then the answer would be given to you and say that, okay, each row here represents not one house, but the average data about a given locality. So each row represents one locality, and in that locality, I have several houses. So I am taking data about 126 households. So about 126 houses in that location, and aggregate of those 126 houses is given here. So there are 129 bedrooms in these 126 houses. It means that now you start seeing that most of the data I have for locality 1, these are 1-bedroom houses. And the total number of rooms is 180. It means that apart from the bedroom, you have 5-6 other rooms, which will be your drawing room, your kitchen, maybe, a wash area and things like that. So that's the information you will get, and now your perspective would change, and you start thinking that, okay, now the median housing value is for one given house, but the sum of the data I have got is for the group of houses. So how do I really do the processing so that I bring them to the same base? It means that how do I find out uh, that this price is pertaining to a single house? So I will have to do some conversion of data to find out, to convert the total rooms into rooms per house, or bedrooms into bedrooms per house, and things like that. So just by seeing this data, you will start formulating your further questions for that you will ask to your domain expert or your customer, or the project manager. The first thing is that we fetch the data, and then we start getting a feel of the data, start noting down our questions for further analysis, for further understanding. Okay. But we will come to that later. The first part that I want to show you, that in pandas and in Python, we are not just going to deal with the structured data as we are seeing here. So here the data is given to me in the CSV format, which is a very structured format. I can read that in Excel, I can read that in pandas, I can read that in any of the RDBMS. That's one kind of data for which you have the different types of functions available to read the data. But as data scientists, and more today, you will be dealing with the unstructured data, like the text data or the images, or the data which is streaming through the web. So for example, what is the click pattern, or what is the tapping pattern on your um, mobile app, or the click pattern on the web application? Everything is getting captured nowadays. So every operation that I do on the device, it is being captured. So for example, if you have a website, I would like to analyze the click pattern. So for example, after seeing some 2 or 3 things on the uh, web page that you have, you see that when it comes to the payment, when it comes to clicking on the pay button, then people don't, maybe only 50% of the people are clicking on that. So that you will come to know that 100 people are visiting my website, but only 50 are going to payment section, and 50 are actually dropping out. So that kind of click analysis is also a very important part of data science today. The point I'm trying to make is that as a data scientist, increasingly less and less data you will be dealing with, which will be very structured in nature, which will be coming in the form of an from a database system or from Excels. A lot of data will be of the unstructured format, and the libraries that we have available in Python, they also handle reading these data from the internet, an article from the internet, or a book, or any kind of other uh, languages, or the information that contains the words, we can read very easily. And that's what I want to demonstrate first. We'll go into the details of the natural language processing later on. But since we are at a stage where we are saying how to get data and what kind of data I would get, I'll just give you some examples. So we have seen that I can get data which is in a structured format, in the CSV format. I can read that, I can see that. Now let's see if there is a book available, or if there is a text data available. We can read that by open command. So we open, and then we give the link here, whatever is the file name, and then we say that open that in the read mode. And we will go into details of that one, that we can open that in the write mode. So if you want to write that, we can open that in the write mode. We can open that in the append mode. So here, just for the purpose of the brief introduction, that we can read not just the structured data, but we can also read the text. I am just giving you a demonstration. And this one I am reading from my drive. So I read from the internet a structured data. I am now reading an unstructured text data from my drive. So I give the location of the file, and then I say that open that in the read mode. And then I say read that. So that has been stored in a variable called book. And then I can say, I say book.read. So if you see, whatever is the content of that, it has fetched, and it is showing me that, okay, this is Lincoln Letters. That's the name of the book, as you can see here. The name of the book was Abraham Lincoln, Lincoln Letters. That's the name of the book by Abraham Lincoln, published by so and so. So whatever information is available in that file, that's being fetched here, and then the text of that starts here. Now we can process this text. It is not in a very structured format. How do we remove all these different types of notations that we have? All those things we will go into and study in detail as we reach the natural language processing. But at this point of time, I just want to demonstrate that I can read a book into Python and we can do different types of analysis. I can read from internet, I can read from my local drive or the cloud. Similarly, I can read an article from the internet. So here I have taken the link for the natural language processing, or for that matter, we can replace that link with anything else. Let me try doing that. So here is an article from today's Indian Express, any random article. What I can do is that here I will come and copy the URL from here, and I'll go and replace this URL. Then we can go to Wikipedia. And let's say search for data science. This is the Wikipedia article on data science. Data science is an interdisciplinary field and so on. Again, I'll copy this here. We'll come back to, and we will replace this URL with not natural language processing, but data science. Now, what I'm doing here is that last one, when I saw in the book, is the raw text. Now, I'm just processing that text a bit further, and you will see that it can be cleaned more and more. So I will, what we are doing here again is that we are defining the URL, which is getting defined here. This URL is being passed to my function, and we saw how to call the function yesterday. So I have defined a function by name getArticle, and that function is expecting a parameter called URL. That is the parameter I am passing. With this URL, we are calling the URL library of Python. From that library, we are calling a function called request, and there is a sub function in that request called URL open, and I provide the URL. The first action, so don't get too much focused on these syntax as such, that you will come to learn. And as I have been emphasizing, it's more important for you to remember that which libraries to use rather than the exact syntax, because help for the syntax is available. So what we are doing here is that we are using the URL library. We are making a request to open this URL. After having opened, then we are calling another function for reading that, and we are storing that into a variable called raw HTML. Then there is a library, and it's a very powerful library in Python called Beautiful Soup. And Beautiful Soup is used for web scraping. It means that whatever data is available on any of the pages or on the internet or on any of the websites, we can actually scrape all the data from there and bring that into our Python, and then we can do different types of processing. So after having got the raw HTML, we are calling the Beautiful Soup library, and we are storing, and then it further processes that, and then I have it available in the in certain form, which I am giving a variable name as article_HTML. This name could be ABC or anything. So this beautiful soup library is processing the raw HTML, and after that, I identify the segregators for the paragraph, and then I go through a loop and say that go through each paragraph and append that to my blank text. Okay, so we'll not spend too much time on this one, because as we go in future to the natural language processing, we will have time to go through each of these things in detail. But just to give you the context, so I am reading this URL, and then I am doing some processing on that one. So that's what we will do here. So after defining this function in which I process, I have given two different links here from the internet, one from the Wikipedia and one from any random article from Indian Express. And I'm storing that into two different documents. Now, as you have seen here, in the case of the books, these sentences are very long, so it's going beyond that. It's not very readable. So uh, I am using the text wrap function so that I can wrap it in 100 words or 50 words. So let me run this one. So now you see this is the article on the website of Wikipedia. Data science is an interdisciplinary field, and so that. Now we have fetched that into our Python notebook, and you see here how easily I have got it. Data science is an interdisciplinary field that uses scientific method and so on. So I have been able to fetch the information which is available on the Wikipedia website. Now with this data, I can do a lot many things. For example, as we go along into our NLP classes, we'll be able to automate the function of saying that what is this article about. So without even manually we can read this, but can we ask the machine to say that whether this is an article about sports or politics or data science, the system would be able to identify by itself. Okay, and nowadays that is being done mostly by the machines itself. So for example, I'm not very sure if you have read this article some time back, that Microsoft, for running their MSN website, you see that there are a lot of news articles are being given there. So in the backend, they had a team, a large team of the journalists who used to collate this data, who used to categorize them into different categories, and then create the short headlines. So, for example, many of you may be using the InShot. So, how does it happen? So, Microsoft was in news because they actually asked about 1,000 journalists which were working for Microsoft for their different websites. They asked them to leave. I mean, they were asked to go because all of them are being replaced now by data science algorithms. So the news comes in, the analysis of the news, giving the headline by reading the news article, categorizing the news, all of these are now being done by the algorithms in the backend. So the human journalists, they have been replaced now by completely by the data science and the machine learning algorithms. So some of these things we will see as we go to the natural language process. The purpose today was that we can get a structured data. We can put that into our data frame. We can read unstructured data like text, and we will also see image processing as we go along. So we can read the structured data, we can read from the internet, we can read from the local drive, and then we can fetch that data, do some processing, and then the entire article is there on my notebook. And with this now, we can do a lot of different types of processing, which gradually we will see how to process the text data, how to process the image data, and so on. But for the so that's how we read different types of data. Now, having done that, now we will. So I showed you the Wikipedia article. Let's see here what is there in document 2 that also we had read. This So document 2 was this article here. There is some property dispute or something in an ongoing litigation over taking possession of a prime slot. So if you see, there is a lot of information here. It is just filtered out for me, the article. So as we come here, we see here, same text I'm able to fetch. Now with this, I can do a lot of analysis that what kind of article is this and who would be the possible reader group so that I can categorize and so on. All those things we'll see as we go along. So now having read that data, this is a few other articles and all that. We will now go into our housing data set and we'll try to understand that data. So having got that, the first thing we saw in a few steps that we will take in order to understand that data, that we are saying what is contained there, and that we can see by housing that head that we have already seen. Similarly, we can see the first 5 records, we can see the last 5 records or last 10 records. So we see the last 10 records by seeing housing.tail. So these are the last 10 records. So we are seeing the beginning, we are seeing the end, and we are seeing that, okay, there is this kind of data is available. And I come to see that I have 20,640 records. Then I see the shape of the data which I have got. So as I run housing.shape, it shows me how many rows we have and how many columns we have. So now the data we have got, it has got 20,640 rows. So these are some of the things that I would like to get a feel of it, how large the data I'm going to deal with. I have got that from giving the command of the file.shape. Having known that, other things, so these are the specific steps that we'll go through, and I have listed out all these things in my Excel also. So having come here, we can get to see what are the data types, what does the data represent, the shape and size, whether the data is correct or not, the data is complete or not. So these are the things that we need to focus on. Let's see, and all these things, we need to see the head and tail and shape and data type, information, describe. Some of these things we have dealt earlier. So we'll go through each of them. So having got that file, first I see what are the different columns, what is the shape and size of my database. Then I see that what are the data types, and that will help me see that are there certain transformations that I need to do. So we see that some data is available in the numeric form. There is one data available in the string form, which is being shown here as the object. So rest of the data is available to me in the numeric form, either float, that is data with decimals, or integers. And there is one data which is available to me in the string form, and that we have seen here, that the ocean proximity here is given to me in the string form, which is either inland or near bay, and there could be certain other values. So that the purpose of seeing this is to now I understand that in what format my data has come in, so that now your mind should start thinking that, okay, there is some data available in the string form. I need to have a strategy for this, that how do I really make it usable by the algorithms, because my analytics algorithm will not be able to consume the string data. Okay, so having seen the data types, then I will call for the info function, and that gives me some further information, not just the data types, but the number of records and how many are null or not null. So by seeing this info, does something strike you? Just see this and tell me, is there, do you find some anomaly here? Is there something that as a data scientist we need to get focused on? So I'll wait for you to see this data and tell me if you're finding something which we need to further work on or where I should get concerned with. Either you can type out or you can speak out. Great. So Rishabh says that if you see total, rest everything is having 20,640 records. When you come to total bedrooms, I have records available only for 20,433. So having seen that, now you should note it down and see that, okay, now two things I have noticed. One is that the ocean proximity is available not in the numeric form, so I need to address that. Now total bedrooms data I don't have available for all the records. There are certain records for which I don't have data available for total bedrooms. So what do I do with that? Good. So after seeing the uh, some more information by giving the info command, now I would like to see what is the nature of data that I have got. So I know that I have got 20,640 records. Out of them, but for one, everything is numeric. I have some missing data in total bedroom. Now we will try to see that, okay, with the describe function, certain statistical features of this data. So as I run this housing.describe, now it is showing me some more information. It is showing me the count and count for the data I have in each column. As you can see that the same thing is being shown here. Total bedroom is only 20,433. Now it shows you the mean of each column. That is, the mean is the average. So what is, so I have data available in some 20,000 plus records. The average age of the house is 28 years. The average of total bedrooms is 2,635. And I have got the clarification already that this data is one row represents the data of houses in a given locality and not of an individual house. So that's okay. Total rooms in a given locality is 2,600. Total bedrooms are so many. So you start getting a feel of, okay, that on an average, uh, a house, for every bedroom that you have in the house, there are four other rooms. That would be very naturally, a kitchen would be there, a drawing room would be there, a storeroom would be there, and things like that. The average population in the given locality is around 1,400, and that is comprised of around 500 households. Now you will see here that median income is 3.8 or something. Now you will start wondering that what is this? Is this given in thousands or is that given in million? Is that for per month or is that given as per year? So these are the questions. Again, by seeing these numbers, you will again go back to your customer or your domain expert and say that help me understand that what this median age actually represent, because the median income can't be $3.87. This data pertains to a state in US. So obviously the income can't be only 3.87, so it is actually representing something else. What is that something else that we need to go and understand? Whereas the housing value looks reasonable to us because the 206,000 or $2 lakh is the price of the median price of the house. So as you have seen here, that two of the concept of statistics you're already getting introduced to. Mean, average, everyone knows. Median, some of you may have forgotten from what you learned from the school days, so let me just repeat that. Median is the midpoint. It means that if you arrange the entire data in the ascending or descending order, the midpoint of that is the median. So that may differ from mean, because the values on both sides need not necessarily be homogeneous. So while mean is the average, the median is that if you arrange all the data in ascending or descending order and just take the midpoint of that, uh, midpoint of the range, that's the uh, median. And we will go into some of these concepts in detail as we go along. So it gives you the median, the standard deviation, what is the minimum value, the maximum value, and the percentile value. All of these things we have seen how to read and how to interpret that. And some of these things like the standard deviation or skewness we will see later. So now I have got a fair idea about the data, but I haven't seen that data yet. We have not seen the entire data because we have seen only the head, we have seen only the tail, and we have seen the aggregate numbers. So we get the feel of the data much better if we do some sort of a plot. So we are putting the histograms here for each of these data items by calling housing.hist. So that creates the histogram. So the kind of data you are seeing here, it's called a histogram. What it does is that I have given the bin size is equal to 50. It means that it will do a sorting of the data on each field. It will take the blocks of 50 and then it will plot it. So if you see here, what it is showing is that, let's take one of these, that number of households. So I have data about 20,000 records. And then you start seeing here that the number of households living in the given locality. In some localities, you have 1,000 households. In some locality, you have 2,000. In some localities, we have 5,000. But by seeing this representation, you're able to make out that what is the distribution of the households in different given localities. So some localities have very few households, but most of the localities are having the households, which is maybe 2,500 or higher. That's what these show. When you come to the housing median age, how do we interpret this histogram? It shows that there are the distribution of the houses given the age. So you are able to see that majority of the houses are actually more than 10 years old. And when we come to some 50 or 55, there is a large number of houses here. So that gives me a feeling that, okay, why there are so many houses which are having the same age here, I mean, more than 50 years of age. Then you see that there are two different blocks, and these are called the mode. What is called what we mean by mode is that the data which is the most frequent one. So if you see here, houses which are about 15 years old, there are about 800. And houses which are about 35-year old, they're also about 800. Rest of the blocks are actually much less. So it means that there are a lot of houses which are around 15-year-old, and there are a lot of houses which are about 35 years old. That is the kind of thing that we get to see in the histogram or in the graphical representation of data, which was not very visible to us, or which not very easy to comprehend when you just see the tables. And that's where it is also important to visualize that. And visualization of data is also an important part of the data science process. Now, similarly, if you see the median income, now you see that there are the lot many people where the median income is around 2.5. And obviously, we need to ask that question from the customer, that what is this 2.5? Is it $25,000 per annum, or what does it represent? So you see that there are lot many people who are having the median income of less than 2.5, and then there are very few people who are having the or there are few people who are having the income of more than 5. Okay. Similarly, you see that most of the houses are having we are seeing this median house value. So the median house value or the most common value range is between 100,000 to $200,000, and there are very few houses which are actually costing more than $300,000. So you get a you get a feel of the dispersion of data, or how this data is actually distributed across different values. Okay. Now you can see here that this histogram is, it is showing you for each column, but for ocean proximity, which was a non-numeric field. So these histograms will be able to draw only for the numeric field. So I have got a feel of all the numeric data which I have in my housing data set, but I haven't got a feel of what is this ocean proximity was about, and that we can do by asking for the value count. So we can give the value count command, and that will show me that what is the count of each of the value in the ocean proximity field. So here I say housing ocean proximity. Now you are familiar with this syntax, that now it will deal with the ocean proximity column alone of the housing data set. So the moment I say housing, and then within bracket I give the name of the column, now I am filtering out the data to that particular column. So I select the ocean proximity column from the housing data set, and then I say give me the value count. It means that see what are the different values in that column, and give me the count of each value. So there are 5 different values in that ocean proximity, which is showing the ocean, inland, near ocean, near bay, and island. And there are only 5 houses which are on an island. There are 2,000 plus houses which are near the bay. There are 2,600 plus houses which are near the ocean. There are 6,000. So majority of the houses are actually inland. It means that they are slightly far away from the ocean. But I also have the ocean-facing houses, the houses near the bay, houses. You know, this H ocean is not very clear to me, so I'll go and ask this question: that what is this 1H ocean? So about 9,000 houses are there. So actually, I get the feel that it is giving me the location of the houses, whether they are sea facing or they are bay facing, or they are on the island, or they are inside, and the count of all the houses. So for any categorical field or for any string field, and we use the term categorical for that because they normally represent different categories. So for every categorical data, we can get the how they are spread over, or how many counts are there, by giving the value count command. So now I have also got the some information about even the non-numeric field. So I got a good feel of the data by seeing the histogram of the numeric fields. By taking the value count, I have also got a good sense of the non-numeric field that I had, which was the ocean proximity. So having done that, now I can get some more information, which is the now I can also see the correlation between different fields by doing the scatter plot. So this correlation part I will come later, because anyway I'm going to deal with in the statistical part. So just let me bring it down. Okay, so having seen the histogram is representing me the data about one single field, or one single data set, or one single column. Now if I want to see the correlation between the two, that is there a correlation between, say, the median income and the total bedroom, because that will give me some data about that people with what kind of income are having, say, how many total rooms in their houses. That would be one good thing to see. Maybe the people who are richer, they are living in bigger houses, and people who are having lower income, they could be living in smaller houses. So there could be some relationship between the total rooms that we have and the total median income.
So we can do what is called as the scatter plot. So we can choose the two fields, and then we can do the scatter plot. So one will come on the x-axis, one will come on the y-axis. So for example, if we do the scatter plot of the uh, house value and the income, then we get this kind of information. And intuitively we are seeing that there is an upward trend here. That is, most of the people who are having the higher income, not all of them, but as the income is growing, you see that number of the dots that we have on the housing value, that's also, so there is slightly upward trend here, which shows that as the median income grows, which is there on the x-axis, the median housing value also grows. So we can do a scatter plot of any of the two fields here. So for example, if I want to see the correlation between, say, total rooms and total bedrooms, just for the sake of drawing this chart, let's take that. So again, you should use this technique more often rather than typing out. Is that after typing 2 or 3 uh, characters, you should, if the help is not coming automatically, press click and space. So that will give you the different options. So I choose total rooms. I seek help in total bedrooms. So we'll do the scatter plot of these two. One would be uh, on the x-axis and one should be on the y-axis. So if I redraw, now you get this kind of thing, which is very obvious. I mean, that the more number of total rooms you have, the more number of bedrooms you have. So this is an roughly about a 45-degree line here, which means that there is a very strong correlation between the total bedrooms and total rooms. And since this data is about a locality, which is, so more number of rooms you would have, more number of bedrooms also you will have. So that kind of relationship is very clear here. So we can get the data about a single column by drawing the histogram. We can see the correlation between two different data fields by doing the scatter plot. And there would be, I mean, we have not yet gone into the data visualization as such, but the approach from the beginning, what I have been following is that we'll introduce you to different sections in a phased manner. So rather than having a complete section on data visualization, which we will have later, I am still introducing you to how to draw the graph. So if you see here, for drawing these graphs, we import a library which is called the matplotlib. This is the library that we will be importing for doing the plotting. So we import matplotlib, and then there's a pyplot, which is the Python plotting libraries, and we'll import that as PLT. So this is the PLT which we are using while we are drawing the graphs later on. So as we import pandas for the doing different types of operations on data frames, or mostly for the two-dimensional Excel-like operation, NumPy for different types of algebraic operation or the arithmetic operation, matplotlib is for doing the plotting or the drawing the graphs. So having, so if you see here, we are for drawing the scatter plot, we are calling the libraries of the PLT, which was the pyplot library, or the from matplotlib. So we call the PLT, which is the pyplot library, we call the scatter function, and then we provide the data. So scatter graph requires two different data sets. So we can choose that which two different columns we want to give, and then it will take all the information available in those columns, and then it draws the graph. Okay. Any questions so far? Is it clear to you that after having got the data, what are the different steps that we need to follow? And this is more or less the steps that we'll follow with every data set that we do get for analysis. So as we go along, we'll do the exercise not just with the housing data, but we will take many other data sets. And this is the kind of analysis that we need to first do. Coming back to our presentation now. So what we were discussing was that after I have got the data, the first step is to get an intuitive feel. Now we have got the intuitive feel of the housing data set. How does the data relate to my prediction needs? So that we have understood now that now I need to make the prediction for the housing price, the price of the house, and the price of the house. I need to make the prediction based on the other information that we have, which is the latitude, longitude, and all those things. Now, we also need to understand that whether this latitude, longitude is really important for us in the prediction process or not. Because whenever you get the data, not every data that you receive we need to use, because the data is given to you the way it was stored. And it may not have been stored for the purpose of making prediction. It may have been just a record of the houses which are being sold. So for the given purpose that we are doing this analysis, we need to see that what are the data fields which are relevant to us and which are important to us. Then we understand the data types. We understand what this data represent. So for example, latitude and longitude, they represent to us the geographical location. The ocean proximity gives me some information about whether they are, near the sea or far from the sea or away from the sea or on the island, because maybe the sea facing houses would have a higher value, things like that. We got to see the shape and size of the data. There are 20,000 plus records, and I have data available on 10 different columns. It means there are 10 different attributes of that data which I have. Then we saw the completeness of data. So the total bedrooms is the one column or one feature, as we call it in the machine learning or data science language. So each of these columns would be called features. So we saw that there is one feature, total bedroom, for which I don't have complete information available. Otherwise, everything else I have got the data. So we need to think about that. What are we going to do with that missing data? So different approaches could be there. We could say that, okay, remove those observations or those rows where I don't have the data available. We could say that no, fill that with the median values. There are different approaches, and we will come to that. Is the data correct or not? So we saw that the median income is having the values of say 3 or 4. I mean, is that correct, or is that some other representation? We need to ask that question. Okay. So we have gone through all of these, that how do we get the feel of the data or the first introduction to our data. After that, we'll delve we'll go into some more depth, and we'll do certain statistical analysis of the data we have got. Until now, what we have done is simple kind of analysis, trying to get a feel of that. But now we should delve a bit deeper into it and see that what is the characteristic of the data, and some of these things are represented through certain statistical analysis. So a few things I have not yet covered, which I will cover tomorrow. For example, the concept of the skewness and kurtosis, and why is that important at all. But a few things already. We have seen the mean, median, and the mode. Min and the max range was being shown to us when I asked the system to describe the data set. So we saw the min and max, and by that I also have got a feel of the range, because the range of each data element is between the min and the max. We'll go into some of the other concepts like the correlation, the skewness, and so on. So let's, after having done the basic analysis and getting to feel, having got a feel of the data, now we'll take that data and try to see it from the statistical angle, which is also a very important part of the knowledge toolkit of the data scientist. So some of these things are very common sense, you would be knowing, and some of these things I will be covering in detail as we go along. So let's see the mean values. Although we have already seen here in the describe function, you also have another function called mean. So I just say the name of the data frame and dot mean, it will give me the averages of each column. So for each non-numeric column, it is giving me the average. As you can see here, that here also the ocean proximity is not there because that's not really a numeric field. So you get to see the mean values of different columns that you have. Similarly, you can find the median values, which is the midpoint of each of these. And obviously some of these things would be close, but not exactly the same. I can also ask for the mode, and mode is that during in the data set, at which place it's the most frequent one. So for example, if you see here in the histograms, I can find out the modes here also. So for example, for the household, the mode is, or the most frequent one is somewhere around 5,000. That is what it looks like, but it has done some binning here. That is, it is taking the set of 50, and then one column represents the 50 data points or 50 observations or 50 records. But here it will deal with deal at the individual level. So let's see. Now you see the mode is getting represented in a different fashion, and it has 2 records, not just 1 record, because you can have multiple modes. It means that the most frequent number need not be 1. If you see in the histograms, there are certain data which has multiple modes. So we get the mean, median, and mode. Now these 3 data things are called the statistics about what we call as the central tendency. So when we say the average, more or less it represents the center of the data. So you have a few things on the lower side, a few values on the higher side, the average would be in the middle. And that's why the average, the median, and the mode, they are called as the measurements of the central tendency. That is where the center of the data is. So if there is a class where people have got the marks between say 50 and 80, and we'll say that, okay, the average of that is say 65. So that is giving me some idea about what is the center and then what is the range. So range would be 60 to 80 and center could be 65. So after having got the feel of the central tendency or data about the different measurements of central tendency, which is the mean, median, and mode, we also need to see the dispersion. Now, why dispersion is required? Because there could be a class which has got the marks between say 20 and 100 and average is 60. And there is a class which has got the average marks between 50 and 70 and the average is still 60. So for both of them, the average or the center of the data is the same, which is 60. But the spread of the class is actually very different. In one case, it goes from 20 to 100. Another one, it is 50 to 60. Now, I also need to know what is the dispersion or the range of data or how the data is dispersed, because if I want to see that whether the teacher which teacher has been more effective, then we could say that teacher which is able to bring the entire class in the range of 60 to 80, maybe that teacher has paid attention to even those students which were weaker, and therefore there is no student which is less than 60. But the other class where the dispersion is between say 20 and 100, I could say that teacher is maybe focusing more on the people who are already doing well and not really focusing that much on the students who are really poor uh, in studies. So dispersion is also very important for us to know, not just the average. So average gives you some information, but not it does not reveal the entire information. So as they say that just because the depth of the average depth of the river is 5 feet, and average depth of the you know the question was that whether the army commander should should order their armies to walk across the river or not. So if you just see the information about the average, somebody reported that okay, the average depth of the river is 5 feet and average height of the people which I have in my command is 5.5 feet. So the question is that whether we should walk across the river or not. Obviously, you can't, because at some places the river could be 8 feet deep, and that's not really going to help. So just by seeing the average number, we cannot take all the decisions. So we also need to know the dispersion. We also need to know that what is the maximum depth of the river, because that is what will decide whether my people will drown or not. So we see the average. So to understand the data, we understand the different measures of the central tendency like average, median, and mode. But equally important is to understand the dispersion, or how the data is distributed. And for that, we have different measures like min and max that will give me the range. So mean difference between the min and the max will give me the total range. Then that range we can define. That range we can define or divide into 4 different parts, and those are called the quartiles. So that we saw yesterday. Now the difference between the first quartile and the third quartile is called the interquartile range. Okay, so it's called the IQR, or the interquartile range. So if I take the value at the 75% here, which is the third quartile, minus the data which is there in the 25 percentile, so that actually tells you that 50% of the data is actually in that range. So for example, if we come to the say median age of the houses, 75 percentile is 37 and 25 percentile is 18. Just to recap what we said yesterday, that this 18 means that 25% of the houses are of less than 18 years of age, and 75% of the houses are less than 37 years of the age. So if I see how many houses are between 37 and 18 years of age, 50% of the houses are between 37 and 18 years of age. So that is what is called as the interquartile range, or Q3 minus Q1 is called the interquartile range. How do we use that? We'll see that later. But one of the important measures that we use is to find the interquartile range, and that is Q3 minus Q1, quartile 3 minus quartile 1. So for the age of the house, we know that it is between 18 and 37 years of age. Now we can do a plot also. We can see this visually also, that how the data is actually spread. I am drawing only 100. So here again, we use the matplotlib library, and we can see that how the data is dispersed. So I'm taking the first 100 records and then we are plotting. I'm not taking all the 20,000 records because it takes a lot of time to do the plotting. So I'm taking each of these records one by one. So I go into a for loop, and then I read the first 8 columns. So 0 to 8 I plot here, and this one is just the size of the plot, that is 15 by 10. I can make it. So I go for I in range 100. It means that when I do the iteration, the first one will be 0, Then I come to the housing data set. I take the 0th row. So as you recall that when we slice the information from a data frame, and if you are using iloc, we'll have to give the indexes. The first one shows the row and the second one shows the range of columns. So I take the first data in the first row and data of the first 7 columns. That is what we are plotting here. And then I go to the second one, then I plot that. So similarly, I will plot the data for the first 100 records. So it looks like this. So I have data on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So these are the 8 different data sets that we are, different features that we are representing here. And as you can see that while the dispersion on the, since all of them are being painted on this single scale, we are not able to see the full picture of dispersion because total bedrooms are running into multiples of thousands and total median income is given only in terms of 3, 4, 5. But still you are able to see that how the data is actually dispersed. So we can see it visually as well. Then I was talking about the interquartile range, and this one we can do a plot what is called as the box plot. Now the box plot, what it does is that it shows me the interquartile range and how many data sets, how many data elements or how many records are actually lying outside that range. So here, if you have a box in the middle and then you will see these 2 lines on the top and the bottom, the way to interpret the box plot is that if you have lot many items outside this range, it means that there are lot many data which is outside the normal range or outside the mid range, and therefore there could be lot many outliers here. So as we explain more about the importance of the interquartile range and how to use that, we will get to understand this, and that we will cover tomorrow. But this box plot actually tells you, or the main purpose of this box plot is to show that whether I have outliers. So if you have too many data sets here, it will show you that I have so many outliers. Let's see here some other. Let's see total. Okay, bedrooms I think has certain. Bedrooms had those null records, if you remember, and that's why it was not plotting. So here, if you see the total rooms, it means that there are lot many houses which are actually outside the quartile range. Okay, so that's how we interpret the dispersion of the data graphically. And we will cover the what do we mean by skewness or the kurtosis and how those are important. We'll cover that tomorrow. So any question from the session today? So from starting today, we are actually getting into the real steps of, we are peeping into the real life of data scientists, what they actually would be doing, what kind of functions they need to perform with certain industry data sets. And that's why I would repeat again that you need to carve out at least 15 minutes to half an hour from your time to spend on these understanding the notebooks, going through the presentations which I share, and come back with questions. So when you're not coming back with the questions, I doubt that you may not have got the time. And if you don't spend that time, then as we move forward gradually, you will find that things will become a bit more difficult. So I will always help you understand that, even if I can understand that given the different things that you have to do, including your for some of you, the work is also there. But if you are regular in spending, even if you take out just 20 minutes, it will be of great help to you, and it will help you understand things much better as we go along. So, any questions or observations for whatever we have covered today? Whenever you feel that we are going too fast and you are missing out in grasping the things which I am trying to explain, or if it is becoming too difficult, please stop me. I will take time to understand. Or for some of you um, who feels difficulty at certain points, and even if you don't want to stop the progress of the class, you reach out to me one on one, and I'm very happy to take a one on one sessions with you for the areas where you find difficulty now, or that offer is open even for future. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, that the objective here is not really to go through the motion of completing things or motion of showing you the things which is important in data science, but the objective is that at the end of the course you should be able to um, join a data science unit of any organization and become productive very quickly. And therefore, if you have any problem in understanding, and if you want my personal time, I am willing to give a time one on one or in smaller groups also. So reach out to me if there are certain things which you find difficult to understand. And of course, all the things like the recorded videos and the PPTs and the notebooks, all of these are already shared with you. People who have joined newly, those things will be available to you. I'll ask Aditya to make it available to you. So keep referring to those things, because if you miss out in the initial stages, a few things will become difficult as we proceed. Okay, so any questions from today's session? Some of you should confirm when I ask a question either on the chat or, yeah, okay. So if there are no questions for today and if there are no observations for today, tomorrow we will go into we'll explain to you a certain things. We'll take up a few topics in statistics, which is also an important part of the data science syllabus. And we will also implement that. How do we implement those concepts using our notebook? With that, we'll end the session today, and I'll make available the link to today's session also by the afternoon. Then see you tomorrow again at 7, and we'll close the session now. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.